Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October meeting of the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee. It's 3:10 p.m. Apologies for the late start. We do not have a quorum yet. We're expecting one later. So we'll save any voting, of which there is not that much, until a little later in the meeting. At the moment, we've got, in terms of WDIC members, we've got Lisa Holmes, Rachel Graham, and myself in person, and Travis Brooks, Ken Clark, and Annie Corman on Zoom. I think we all know each other and it's a bit late, so we can skip any introductions. Changes to the agenda. In line with what I just said about not having quorum, could we just move the appointments and minutes approval to, I guess, right before committee members' reports at the end? Does anyone object to that? Great. Does anyone have any other additions, deletions, changes to the agenda? Seeing none. Chair's report. I do not have a report. I think there might be some interesting reports from others later. So let us move already on to, okay, well, the next item on the agenda is the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion bylaws, but maybe someone let me know, did folks want to have a discussion about those specifically, or have them for reference as we discuss the diversity and inclusion policy and other stuff later? And to be clear, the bylaws in the packet are just the current bylaws that we have, which may be worth updating, but I was not planning on doing like line by line changes in this meeting. So does anyone have comments or things to say or ask about bylaws specifically? Rachel?
I would just say that I do think it will be worth looking at and updating. The last time this was updated was what? May of 23. So we did have a CETO, but I don't think we really incorporated that role at all into the bylaws. We'll want to include the values that have been adopted and possibly some strategic plan priorities. But yeah, I think it's worth us all taking a look at and maybe making some notes so that we can come back to it at a future date.
Thanks, that makes sense. Yeah, the current bylaws do reference the position of the CETO, the Chief Equity and Diversity Officer, but the strategic plan and values we have had not been made yet. And as you all know, we've been having conversations about potential refocusing or restructuring or something of WDIC, and that would likely eventually lead to a bylaws change. All right, but anything else on them for now? Annie.
Just looking at, let's see, officers, secretarial duties. Is that a certain position, or do we want to change that to be that one of the clerks of the legislature will take minutes?
Oh, you're looking at, what is this, Article 5, number 7, the secretarial duties shall be fulfilled by staff assigned to the committee. I interpret that as it's not explicitly in the bylaws that it will be clerks, but the staff assigned to the committee, like there is always one of the legislature clerks assigned to the committee and that they fulfill the secretarial duties. However, I'll let our current clerk comment if that seems incorrect. Yeah. Okay. She says we can talk about it later.
Okay.
I guess when I read this paragraph, I see a bunch of duties that, like, as it is, the clerks are performing. Taylor's sitting in today. It's been Jordan before. It's rotated around, but always been one of the people, one of the deputy clerks of the legislature.
Yeah, I just know that EMC and Case Board are redoing their bylaws, as are a lot of different advisory boards. So I'm just wondering if referring to those at some point to see if we want to have something similar to what other advisory boards are doing.
Is there a particular thing you're thinking of with regard to secretarial duties?
No, I guess I need to see what they put, but yeah, so I don't know. I'd have to look it up what they put for this.
All right, thank you. I guess while we're on this topic, maybe I do have a comment, bylaws related, which is that per the bylaws, we have 13 seats on this committee, and I believe right now only 10 or so are filled. So if you're watching uninterested, or if you know people who are interested in joining, there are seats open to truly anybody, because not all are assigned to particular roles. Let us know. I know we might be changing WDIC in the future, but that is on a longer time scale than it takes to join the committee. Joining is quick. All right, seeing no other hands, let's move on to reports and updates, starting with our Chief Equity and Diversity Officer, Charlene Holmes, if she is ready. Hello.
Hi, everybody. I don't have any particular updates today. I'm actually just here, very excited to hear your feedback about the diversity and inclusion policy. Just to give you a little bit of context, we took an ad hoc committee from JEDI through a retreat process in which we were able to review this particular policy through an equity lens. And we did that over the course of 3 meetings. So we updated this particular policy after identifying that this policy was aspirational about a decade ago. And we actually, in fact, had achieved a lot of the goals in the policy. And so we updated the policy with the next 10 years. So we tried to be as prudent as possible. We added the strategic plan, the upcoming institutionalizing equity report, and redefined the roles of the CEDO, the Human Resources Commissioner, and the county administrator role, as well as updating the values and the scope of JEDI. So I'm just excited to see what your feedback is, and I'm here for any questions.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm wondering if we want to hear a JEDI update and then transition into looking more specifically at the diversity, equity, inclusion policy. Yeah. All right, Rachel, co-chair of JEDI. Is that what your title is?
Yep.
Okay, yes, take it away.
Okay, so we had, since our last meeting, we met October 15th for another equity exchange reading and discussion group. This time, Kevin McGuire facilitated that session, which what did we read? We read White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo and White Privilege and Male Privilege by Peggy McIntosh. Kevin did a fantastic job with that discussion. We had a good turnout. And our next one is going to be on November 12th at the Rice Conference Room at Whole Health again. This theme is dialogue and action, and I'll be facilitating that one. We have we're working on putting together a communications committee from JEDI, which is going to be working on our next JEDI project, and that is going to be a marketing campaign for equity and diversity at Tompkins County. We're looking at putting together a video, which Rob and Dom are going to help us with, and we're going to start by having some history of diversity, equity work at the county, and then interviewing some staff from certain departments about how they do equity intentionally in their work every day. So just hoping to highlight some of the work that a lot of our departments are already doing and some work that we're going to be doing. Let's see, what else do we have? Looking at possibly putting together a grants committee. That's just in the beginning stages and some ideas that we've been floating around. And we have one more part to our own JEDI reading and discussion group that we're going to finish up in our next meeting. I think that's all I have. Ken and Charlene, let me know if there's anything I missed.
No, I don't think so. I think that covers the work.
Awesome, thank you. That's a robust slate of projects, which is really good to hear. Any questions for Team JEDI? Seeing none, let's dive into the diversity and inclusion policy. The proposed updated diversity and inclusion policy, as Charlene mentioned. And to be clear, what you've got in your packet is the updated version, which is, we are now, this committee looking at it is one step in the middle of the process of the policy, going from beginning to be reviewed to being adopted in an updated form. And I want to say I appreciate the work that those of you who have done a lot of work on this already, like you described, Charlene, have put into it thus far. And then if you want to compare it to the old policy, that is still what is posted in the administrative policy manual for the county online, because that remains, as of this moment, our official diversity and inclusion policy. Does anyone have immediate comments, questions, and or would any of the folks who have already been diving deeply into it have any things they want to point out to get us started?
One of the things that I would like to point out and thank the ad hoc group who worked on this and committed to this process. We recognized that we wanted to center the experiences of the people that this particular policy would truly impact and affect. And so as you all are reading through this policy, if you find places where we haven't done that or where we can enhance that, please bring that forward. We really want this policy to reflect the type of culture that we'll be seeking to continue to create in our strategic plan, which is fostering a sense of belonging. And so even down to our terminology, we try to be as precise as possible. So just wanted to give you guys that context as you review through this policy as well. And one last thing, the policy is also proposed to be changed to the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, moving from diversity and inclusion to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. That is a good point that I was missing. Adding the equity. Anyone else? I mean, I have stuff marked, but I don't want to start by taking up the air. I guess I'll say one thing, because it's toward the top sort of, is I noticed a lot of things were added into the definitions, aligning with what Charlene just said about specificity. I don't think any terms got dropped, but we've added in a definition of the Chief Equity and Diversity Officer, of discriminatory harassment, of equity itself, which I think is also really good, because we've got people asking, like, what does that even mean? I sort of get the abstract idea. And I think this definition is really good. We've got microaggressions, non-employee, Team Jedi, the values are included. And something I found as like a teeny thing, but interesting, is that the definition of employees has added on volunteers and unpaid people doing work for the county, and I don't think it did before. And I'm curious if anybody can comment on that. I certainly don't, I think that like generally makes sense, and those are the type of questions where I wonder, like, what is the HR, like, employment, I don't want to say policy, like, are there official term and like rules that govern this terminology that this like fits into with the update? Sorry, that was barely a question. Can someone comment on that shift from the definition of employee in this context?
I'm just seeing it now, and it's, I'm not sure if it's consistent with the definition in other policies or if it's applicable only to this policy. So I'm not sure. There are certain policies where employee would include only paid employees, and others where I know, for instance, we require our volunteers and interns, et cetera, to receive sexual harassment training, and those policies, that policy applies to that broader definition of employee. So, so this may apply to that broader definition.
Yes, I'd like to give a quick clap to Joan, who worked on this. One of the key things that we recognized in the policy was that in the reference section, we referenced multiple policies, but they weren't consistent. There was an inconsistency in the communication throughout the D&I policy in relation to those. So employee is a culmination of all of those references of the policies that pertain or apply to this particular policy, or that were referenced in this policy, meaning that we encumbered all of the individuals who were represented in all of those reference policies. And Joan did that for us. And Rachel and Dr. Clark, if I am wrong, and I'm reading this wrong, please forgive me, but I remember us having this conversation in our retreat.
Yeah, I'd say that's exactly right.
Awesome, thank you, and thanks to Joan. And I guess my assumption with the definitions in each of the policies, I guess our administrator can correct me if I'm wrong, is that they, like, the term as defined within a policy, that definition applies within that policy. It doesn't necessarily apply in other policies. It might, but if, employee is defined elsewhere in some policy that has to do with compensation, for instance, that would seem normal to me.
Thought process along these lines too are the county, in its efforts to meet our Article 15 goals or our MWBE, DBE, ACDBE utilization, and or whenever we're contracting with companies to allocate, in which we allocate resources to, those employees underneath that particular contract are also represented in our diversity, equity, and inclusion policy internally. Some of that language I see in the state and the federal guidance, so we try to use that and be as consistent as possible. but totally open to exploring this a little bit more so it's more refined and people understand it clearly. But we wanted to represent everyone who is internal and an external stakeholder in this particular policy while also referencing and creating a more centralized approach to who's represented in this policy based off of the other policies that are referenced. I hope I'm saying that properly. I've been having a hard time articulating today.
I understood you, at least. Other things people are noticing or have questions about or would like to see in a DEI policy? I'm so noticing some of the specific new initiatives that, you know, we've been talking about a lot, explicitly included in the policy, like departments incorporating 1 or 2 equity indicators into their work plans through the institutionalizing equity report. So happy to see that in there. Oops.
I did leave something in this policy that I had hoped you all picked up on, but we would like guidance from WDIC on this. In policy B, in the policy portion, part B, Tompkins County government shall fulfill its organizational commitment by establishing a WDIC, which is number 1, and number 2, adopting a code of ethical conduct. I'd like some guidance around that. Well, Jedi would like some guidance around that, in that the committee was established and we do have a code of conduct. So what the language would be around that would be nice to get from this space. So I intentionally left that with the intentions of having this conversation.
And do you mean you're interested in getting language about how do we include a workforce diversity and inclusion committee and a code of ethical conduct for all employees in the diversity and equity and inclusion policy, but without wording it like these things don't yet exist, because they do?
Yes.
That is a great question. Does anyone have thoughts? I mean, I guess I notice like bits in here that are ongoing, like in number 1, when it says establishing a workforce diversity and inclusion committee, that has happened, but then some of the language after it, I guess I haven't read carefully, but it says some stuff about what WDIC shall be doing in an ongoing way, what Team Jedi will be doing in an ongoing way. And then for the code of ethical conduct, they're like, well, the second half of it is about establishing a system of accountability to ensure that everyone upholds the code, et cetera, which that could be even reworded to maintaining a system of accountability. But I will say I don't know what our system or systems of accountability are as well as I should.
I think that's still aspirational in some ways. One of the methods that we have, or we're working towards instituting, is our strategic plan, meeting those objectives, and also the equity indicators through our institutionalizing equity report. There are conversations about developing a bias reporting structure. And so mostly aspiration at this point, but those would be some of our accountability measures, and also the policy in and of itself as a policy maker, that that would be one of our accountability measures and our values, our commitment to our values too. And I see Joan is on the call, so hi Joan, if you guys have any questions for her.
I was watching via YouTube and realized maybe if someone actually wanted to ask me a question, I should be here.
Welcome, Joan. We're happy to have you. And Robert Brown has also joined us virtually, another committee member. I wanted to ask about the bias reporting structure. I guess, can you say more about what that is? Or I see that the policy would be to develop one, but can you say more about what such a thing is?
Bias reporting structure is if bias incidents happen within a workplace, there is a formalized way to, one, for the individual or individuals who are impacted by that bias to report the incident, and then two, for that particular organization to either investigate and or follow up on that incident in a formalized fashion where it's laid out, the expectations are laid out on both sides and everyone's understanding of what that process would be. And then that way we can kind of measure ourselves against ourselves, kind of take a look in the mirror to see some data around how many complaints we've had, where are they coming from, why are they happening, and have a more intentional intervention if we find that we have high incidence of bias in our community. We have a similar structure for our community members through our Title VI under our compliance program, but we do not have one that's internal. So we are looking to explore what that would look like. And I've been in conversations with Jesse, who also works on compliance. We've talked to IT, and we're looking to have a more formalized approach with human resources. But these are all blue sky conversations, and nothing is in writing. So please don't hold me to it yet.
I won't. Well, this isn't our policy yet.
Yes.
What sort of resources do you think the county government would need to carry out some of these blue sky things that it doesn't already have?
Right now, I would say staff time would be the largest portion because human resources is certainly at their capacity, and the CEDO is one person with some volunteer interns, and JEDI spends a lot of their time volunteering, and the staff time that it would take to build that structure, build a policy around that structure would be our largest resource. Jesse and I identified that we do have a software, Laserfish, that would be able to digitally track. So that was a relief for us, but staff time around, we're incentivizing staff working on this because tangentially it's not a part of their job, would be our largest resource that we would need support in that way.
Thank you. Who else has things to say before I just carry on? I've got some more. Rachel.
Yeah, I just want to point out that one of the things as we were looking at this is we're reading it and we're like, but who does this? And so that was one thing that we intentionally, in updating it, tried to identify for each action item who was responsible for doing that and what that might look like. Yeah, just wanted to throw that in there.
Thank you. That's a good question to ask. I see not all the items mention who does the thing, though. Or, well, maybe I'm just not looking deep enough into the procedure. Never mind. As I do scan through the procedure, okay, I see you have mentioned who does each thing. It's quite a lot is put on 3 individuals. Mm-hmm.
I would say there, in some of these, the action items, for instance, the employee performance review system is a policy unto itself. So is flexible work arrangements, and they're governed by those policies. So it would be my preference to keep them in their own policies as opposed to being governed under this one.
That makes sense. Is there a way to, or would it make sense to refer to those policies from this policy somehow?
Be listed on the top under reference.
Sorry, just writing that down. Others?
In
Yeah,
fact,
Lisa.
also, the same with the discrimination, discrimination, harassment, et cetera, is its own policy. I'm not sure if that was, when this policy was originated, I'm not sure if the discrimination and harassment policy already existed. I'm not sure which one predated the other, but one or the other could have served as the catch-all for both, but now it has its own policy.
We could look back in the records and see. I'm not going to do that now, but. Something else I'm noticing in here, at the risk of being a broken record, bringing this issue up, is that also in policy B6, you've kept the thing that says that the government will administer a climate survey every 3 to 5 years, which was in the old policy. I think if I'm looking at the change is just that instead of just saying administering a climate survey, it's administering through the CEDO and county administrator's office. But as we know, we have not been doing it every 3 to 5 years, or I guess we will have ended up skipping one because the last one was in 2018, and the next one is going to be sometime beyond 2025, probably, given the budget amendments that have been made going into our the final vote on that. So what does it mean if we're maintaining a piece of a policy that we know we're not following? Or is this an expression of an intention to like recommit to something in the future? Does it need to be mentioned? Or is this another blue sky thing, even if it is blue sky that we've once been in? Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that exists in our existing diversity and inclusion policy. And when we updated it, we didn't know yet that the legislature was going to vote to not fund it in 2025. So we were going into it thinking that it would be happening in 2025. And I don't think that's aspirational. I think that's what the policy is. So I think that would be a great question for our legislature.
I guess maybe this open, you know what, I'm gonna keep that to myself. Other comments?
Generally speaking, my perspective on policy is that one of the foundational elements is don't write into policy something that you're not going to do. It's what I call the clean the toilets on Friday policy. If you do it on Tuesday, then you're in violations. So why write it in? However, I am in favor of keeping the climate survey in policy and noting when we do not follow the policy, as in this instance, that we skipped it or that we did not administer it, not because we chose not to, but because the legislature chose to adjust the funding priorities for that particular year. I don't think that it is in the county's best interest to remove an expectation that we conduct this sort of climate monitoring.
Thanks for that, Rob. I tend to agree with we shouldn't put things in policy that we're not going to do. The thing that made me think of is, although it's silly, places where just I wander around the world and see COVID signs still telling people to like stand 6 feet apart at all times in places where absolutely no one is following that, and it seems like worse that such signs are not taken down, because it sort of sends the message that the signs are meaningless, or in the policy context that the policy is meaningless. Something stood out to me in what you said, though, something else that you were saying, noting when the policy is not followed, that it wasn't because, correct me if I'm misquoting you, but it was something like, it's not because we chose not to follow it, it is because the legislature adjusted their funding priorities. And I'm just curious, who is we, if that was the right framing?
We being WDIC/administration, making a note in the public record that it was a matter of financial policy rather than disregard for the policy and the intent for ongoing climate monitoring for the purpose of improvement, et cetera, et cetera.
That makes sense. Lisa.
I would also add to that in 2023/2024, there also was somewhat of an intentional desire to want to do a climate survey, but we were also awarded grant funds to do the strategic operations plan. And it was something that we wanted to take advantage of, and we lacked the staff capacity. So it was the intention at that time to put off by a year or so the climate survey. It wasn't that we didn't want to do it. It was a capacity issue, and we did reap benefits from the strategic operations plan. So that. What we didn't know then was that that would be followed by a budget year where we had to do some cutbacks. So unfortunately, that happened back to back.
Thank you for reminding us of that recent history. Annie.
Yes, I was going to second what Rob said and add in what Lisa said, if that could be summarized in our minutes and kept in the policy, because we're out of compliance, or we're not following up the policy by the legislature voting not to fund that. So I'm okay with I think it's actually important to leave it in the policy.
Okay, noted, thank you. Any other comments, questions, suggestions about the proposed new diversity, equity, and inclusion policy? If not, I have a final question and I guess to some of the staff folks most involved with updating the policy so far and updating policies in general is what is a good next step from this moment with the policy? Lisa?
I think from here it will go to county administration, to the red line version for review to be sent out to departments, and then it would go to GO. I don't know if this committee wants to see it a second time or not.
Well, I guess, and this might be just me not doing my job, but what if members of this committee if members of this committee want changes to the policy, how should they do that? Or if the committee as a whole, like, wants to suggest changes, what, like, should we be, it doesn't feel practical to, like, decide them and vote on them on the fly here. But I don't know, like, should we solicit offline input and vote on something next time? Or should we just say, looks good and we've kind of given our thoughts and some of you are administration, so carry on, or what?
Yeah, I'm not sure what we would be voting on at this point because it's still in draft form and will be continued to morph, and more edits will be incorporated. But if people, based on today's discussion or after the fact, have additional suggestions, if you want to send those in to county administration, Charlene or myself, in the next couple of weeks, that would be fine. And then it will just, I think, go through the standard review process.
Okay, thank you. Well, y'all have your instructions. And I guess I want to lift up one last time, because we didn't get much into it, but Charlene's request for feedback and thoughts around the first two items in the part 2B of the policy, the Tompkins County government shall fulfill its organizational commitment by establishing WDIC, et cetera, and adopting a code of ethical conduct, et cetera. And how we would word that, given that some of those things have been done. Right. Anything else before we move on? Going once, twice, gone. Okay, thank you all for that. Next up, more policy. There's been expressed a desire to, sorry, I think I'm gonna sneeze, review the flag policy, and the flag policy's first stop is this committee. This was a brand new policy 5 years ago. And what you've got in your, I think this has not received any potential updates yet. So what you've got in your packet is the existing flag policy, which I was not around for the creation of, but I heard it was a robust and perhaps not crisp process, to use some of our legislature's favorite terminology. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the impetus, or at least one impetus to review it now, is that the policy only talks about flags flying on the outsides of county buildings, and yet in practice we do fly flags on the inside of buildings, and we've had some arguments about what flags should or shouldn't be flown on the inside of county buildings. So I would like to, this is in the agenda just as a minimum, to call your attention to it and solicit any feedback on the policy, either like specific things you would change or general aspects that you think maybe are problematic or good, or things that should be added, or thoughts you have about flags flying inside county buildings. I think we can take a little more time with this one, or in the sense that, like, you know, we could look at this again next meeting or whenever. But I wanted to at least put that out there, and then of course right now open up the floor for discussion. Annie.
Yes, I just want to add to what you said, Veronica. That all sounds accurate as far as I know. Just to add that Government Operations Committee is looking at updating this, so we just want to probably make sure we communicate with them on their process. Or, all right, have you talked to them? Are they going to allow us to take a first stab at it?
Yes, I think I talked with Amanda Champion, Chair of GO, and Bridget Nugent, Deputy County Administrator, and the plan was WDIC takes a first stab, then sends it to GO, and they carry on with edits. And I'm not sure where we go from there, but that's current step and next step.
Okay, great, thank you.
Lisa?
Just to refresh my memory, the question that was being asked at GO was specifically about flags flown inside legislature chambers, and it came up regarding specifically flag of another nation, like the Ukrainian flag. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
So wording to get at, to address when those questions come up would be most useful? Okay.
I believe so, yes. And I guess you might note, I don't remember if this is in an appendix to the flag policy itself or just an attachment to our meeting packet, but there's a little graphic with rules about flying the US flag. I do recall at least once at a legislature meeting, I think we had a debate over when you fly a flag of another country next to the US flag, should they be at the same height or not? I informally researched this on my own and found that flag code actually says conflicting things on this point, and there is not, in fact, one clear, true answer, the way there is about many other things about how to fly the flag. But like, take that with a grain of salt. I don't have citations right now. I'm not ready to recommend language in the policy now. Any other in the moment discussion on flag policy?
I think that it's an interesting reason to be looking at it again, to be talking about the display of the flag of another polity, which we didn't fully anticipate when we worked on this the first time in a fulsome way. A lot of our focus was on establishing boundaries for how we identified and approved flags symbolic of diversity and inclusion as a way of publicly demonstrating our embrace, Black History Month, flying appropriate banners, Pride Month, flying appropriate banners, and so forth. The question of flying the banner of another nation as a gesture of solidarity wasn't really in our minds at all, or at least certainly not mine. And that opens quite a wide range of sticky conversations, as opposed to around which polities we may recognize through which action of the legislature adopting a position of solidarity with that nation, and for what purpose, and how that relates, generally speaking, to the sentiments and the position of our county government. I don't have an answer for that. I really don't. I have feelings that are based on my own socio-political beliefs, regardless of how they may be identified. I personally, Rob Brown, would be very supportive of demonstrating solidarity for those that I consider to be oppressed or unfairly targeted nations or bodies within nations, right? Such as ethnic groups that are subject to persecution within a particular national border. That's me. How do we resolve it as our public government? Again, I really don't have any answers other than the throwaway easy answer of it must be an action taken after a duly recorded debate and vote of the legislature as a whole. Because these acts of solidarity, as opposed to displaying either our national and state and county identity or our support of the diversity of the populations that exist within our community and nation, is a very different subject from how we started on creating this policy in the first place.
Thanks, Rob, for those thoughts and your recap of some of the history of having a flag policy in the first place. Any other discussion? Would people support bringing back the flag policy for discussion at the next WDIC meeting, with the idea that people could look it over and submit thoughts by email to, I suppose, me and or the clerks and or Vice Chair Travis, in the meantime, so that we have something more concrete to discuss next meeting, after which we could send it off to GO. I hear one support. Does anyone object to that plan? Travis.
I think that's a good plan. It gives people time to look at the policy, maybe do some research, and come back with some ideas.
Awesome. All right, let's do that then. And welcome Nick, who has just joined us after a prior engagement.
Thank you, Veronica.
Okay, we are on to number 10, upcoming proclamations. We're approaching November, which is Native American History Month. We have done a proclamation for this in the past, and in your agenda packet, you have the copy of last year's. If we'd like to do this proclamation at the first November meeting, I think we need to have it revised and submitted by October 29th, which is Tuesday of next week, according to our clerks. So, I mean, if someone has burning thoughts about the details, feel free to share it. But I'm more looking for, one, does anyone want to volunteer to help work on editing, rewriting this? Or two, does anybody have a different suggestion about how to honor Native American History Month? And I'm happy to work on editing and updating this. And Charlene, I'm hoping that you would be willing to give it a pass as well.
Sorry, I couldn't find that unmute. Absolutely.
Awesome, thank you.
I would just like to voice that, yes, I think it absolutely should be proclaimed. So, and I'm in favor of that. I know last year, I think myself and Rachel worked on it. I normally would love to, I'm wondering if, I remember last year it was kind of helpful. We were having a lot more discussions of specifically like local Native American like politics that were going on at the time, and particularly with the Gayokono. I would have to do a little bit of research personally, like if I were to work on it. I don't know if anyone knows of anything that would be good to add, but like off the top of my head, I can't think of anything specific, but definitely yes on the proclamation.
Thank you. I'm trying to summarize in my head how to, like, what is the appropriate way in this context to deal with presenting commentary on modern issues within and around the Gayokono people from a mostly, if not entirely, like non-Gayokono lens. And when there's some I don't know, I don't want to be dismissive and say it's complicated, but also it's complicated.
I think that acknowledgement, like just acknowledging that and being upfront and right, not necessarily taking ownership, but just providing a platform, providing like a jumping board for the proclamation, like as a celebratory piece, and acknowledging that it's being delivered from a mostly non-native standpoint, and maybe even like inviting comment. I don't know the best way, I'm not a legislator, right? But like in some way, I mean, that might even be in this proclamation, but kind of framing it as like this is being done from a like an appreciation standpoint. I personally don't see it coming across as appropriation, but I mean that could just be me. I think it's a positive thing.
Your input is valuable, thank you. Robert.
As with the last time we talked about this in the context of current affairs, I personally am extremely uncomfortable as a county government expressing an opinion on current affairs other than a commitment to respect the self-determination of indigenous sovereign nations without colonial interference by other parties. I do not think, in my own perspective, that it is appropriate for us in any way, considering who and what we are, to, however well-intentioned, take our own steps to interfere in their independent affairs as a sovereign people.
Thanks, Rob. I do agree with that. Any other comments about Native American Heritage Month and/or the proclamation about it? All right, thank you all. I think we have a plan for that. And moving on, we are back up to items 5 and 6, which were moved down to here. We do have quorum now, so we can vote on things. First, we have, Taylor, you're gonna correct me if I mess up, right? But an advisory board appointment, which is to reappoint Rachel Graham to the Workforce Diversity and Inclusion Committee. She is a current member with an expiring term, so this new appointment would appoint Rachel Graham in one of the staff member specific seats for a term expiring December 31st, 2027. Yes. I guess, do we need someone to move that? And yeah. Lisa moves. Is there a second? Nick seconds. Any discussion? I hope not. All right, let's roll call vote this, I guess for clarity. We'll go Zoom first, then in person. Travis.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Annie.
Yes.
Ken.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Lisa.
Yes.
Rachel, you get to vote, I think.
Yes?
And I'm a yes. That's unanimous. Phew. And thank you for continuing to serve on the committee. Next, we have minutes approval from September 25th. Would anyone like to move those minutes? Lisa moves, Annie seconds. Comments or discussion? Seeing none, let's vote on that. Travis.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Annie.
Yes.
Ken.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Lisa.
Yes.
Rachel.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That is unanimous. All right. Last up, committee members' reports. Does anyone have anything to report or announce related to the work of WDIC?
Well, tonight, we will be premiering a documentary on migration called Are We There Yet? A Compassionate Exploration of Contemporary Migration. Will be held at Cinemapolis at 6. This has been a busy week for us in that regard. On Friday, we did a faculty staff roundtable at Sage Hall about the documentary, along with Tom Hubble, who's the documentarian, the person who was the producer of the documentary. And then on Monday, we met with a class of about 30 students in Warren Hall, where we had a sort of a semi-premiere of the documentary. And so tonight, we will be launching this, as I've mentioned before. This opportunity was presented itself to us in the form of a Cornell Just Futures engagement grant that enabled us to, one, produce 2 of 3 programs so far on migration, and now this documentary. So I'm excited about tonight. And from that point, the documentary will be entered into several festivals, which can lead to a number of positive dividends, monetary and otherwise, if it finds favor. So that's my report.
Awesome, thank you. And you said tonight's screening is 6 p.m. at Cinemapolis?
Yes, and it's free.
Will there be opportunities to watch the documentary after tonight if people can't go tonight? Or does it depend how it does on the festival circuit?
I think it will really come down to a conversation between Tom and I. I don't necessarily think we have to be dependent on that per se, unless there are certain policies, once you make an entry, that might prohibit that. But that's something that Tom and I will discuss.
Awesome, thank you.
And also, too, I should say, I should also thank Jen Michael as well, because I worked with students from Jen's classes in fall of 22 and 23, one, to gather data to address 3 issues related to immigration, or in the broader sense, racism, migration, and dispossession. And last year in the fall, a small group of students helped us to plan the first of these 3 programs.
Awesome, thank you. And I said Jen Micah wanted to be here today, but stuck doing children chauffeuring duty, and I guess wasn't able to make it. Any other committee member reports? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to
Veronica?
Seeing one, Annie.
Yeah, I just was thinking of one thing. As advisory boards are redoing their bylaws, I was just wondering if we wanted to think about, I mean, it might be too late this year, but some advice for advisory boards on DEI issues when they're recruiting and supporting members. And I don't know if that's something that comes under our purview, but it seems like it might.
That's a good point. It does seem like it might. Thanks for bringing that up.
Maybe it could be for next meeting, or but just wanted to bring up that topic.
Okay, yeah. This is something we could probably think about between now and next meeting. Oh, I guess I do have an announcement, which is, when is next meeting even going to happen? We're going to be, I forget what we've said about this before, but we will be, instead of having a November meeting and a December meeting, we will be having just one combined meeting, so only one for the rest of 2024 in early December. We often do this because the typical, what are we on, a 4th Wednesday scheduling lands very close to holidays in November and December. So instead of either of the regularly scheduled meetings, we will be meeting on December 9th from 3 to 5 p.m. I don't immediately.
Say that date again?
December 9. What day of the week is that?
Monday.
It's a Monday.
December 9th, 3 to 5?
Yes. So it's normal time, normal place, but abnormal day. Okay. Any other committee member reports? And thank you for somehow reminding me of that one. All right, now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, see, Annie moves, Rachel seconds, all in favor, informally. We don't need to do this, I just like it. Great, all right, we are adjourned. Thank you all.